I'm Abby Phillip in New York, and welcome to a special edition of Newsnight alongside Laura Coates in Washington. We are moments away now from Nevada finishing up its critical caucus. We'll also hear directly from the likely Republican nominee, Donald Trump. Also today, historic arguments over a Trump ballot battle that played out inside of the Supreme Court. Plus, a charging decision by the special counsel investigating the sitting president of the United States.
And Abby, there's new attention on Joe Biden's memory. Tonight, the president defending his ability to do his job and indignantly insisting that his memory is absolutely fine. He responded to a special counsel report that called him a, quote, elderly man with a poor memory, unquote, by flashing anger and throwing some, well, shade.
I'm well-meaning, and I'm an elderly man, and I know what the hell I'm doing. I've been president. I put this country back on its feet. I don't need his recommendation. It's totally
How bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad I let you speak.
Reporters shouting their questions, the president yelling right back for the mistake of asking entirely fair questions to him. Listen.
Once when you were asked about your age, you would respond with the words, watch me. Many American people have been watching, and they have expressed concerns about your age.
That is your judgment. That is your judgment. That is not the judgment of the press.
They express concerns about your mental acuity. They say that you are too old. Mr. President, in December, you told me that you believe there are many other Democrats who could defeat Donald Trump. So why does it have to be you now? What is your answer to that question?
Because I'm the most qualified person in this country to be president of the United States and finish the job I started.
A good question and a fair question. If voters, though, were watching for signs that all of Biden's neurons were firing, he insisted that they are.
Do you feel your memory has gotten worse, Mr. President?
My memory has not gotten. My memory is fine.
Do you fear that this report is only going to fuel further concerns about your age?
Only by some of you.
Only minutes after that, he said that he had a memory misstep that will guarantee likely questions about his age and mental acuity simply have no intention of going away.
The president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him. I convinced him to open the gate.
In just a moment, Abby will interview Biden's Democratic challenger, Dean Phillips. But first, here for a fact check of some of those claims. We're joined by CNN's Daniel Dale for that very fact check. Daniel, tell me, what stood out to you?
There was at least one claim, Laura, that just was not true. President Biden was saying, he was talking about his handling of classified information. He said it was all at his house, unlike former President Trump, who had stuff at his, club where there were weddings and events and so on. But he also said that all of the classified material at his house was in filing cabinets that were either locked or able to be locked. The thing about this report is that there are photos, there are pictures in there that show that, yes, some of it was in filing cabinets, but there were also classified documents that were just sitting in boxes, at least one of which was damaged, alongside just junk. The special counsel called it household detritus. So the idea that this was all locked up and safe is not true. And the president also made some claims that, at very least, were contradicted by allegations in the special counsel's report. For example, he said he denied that he disclosed any information to his ghostwriter, which was an allegation from the special counsel. And he claimed that all this material was a memo that he wrote to President Obama about why we shouldn't be in Afghanistan. Now, the special counsel did say there was such a memo and related materials, but that there was also a whole bunch of other stuff, specifically that President Biden took notes about very sensitive material during Situation Room meetings, during intelligence briefings with President Obama, and disclosed some of that information to ghostwriters. And I'll mention one more thing. President Biden said that unlike former President Trump, none of the material he had was what he called high classified. Now, according to the special counsel, at least, that is not true. The special counsel reported some of this material was marked top secret, and some of it related to highly sensitive clandestine human source operations. So the real secret stuff that is not supposed to get outside the government was allegedly in possession of President Biden at his home.
Don't go anywhere, Daniel Dale. We have so much more to fact check with you, especially in the next hour of programming as well. So stick around. Abby?
And joining me now is the man who is challenging Joe Biden in the Democratic primary, Congressman Dean Phillips. Congressman, your reaction to that pretty feisty press conference from President Biden?
You know, Abby, it was sad. And I think for Americans watching, a good man. I respect President Biden. I think he's suffered a lot of tragedy in his life. This has got to be awfully difficult to invoke his son, Beau. It appears a crime was committed, but I got to tell you, I felt just like a human watching that, and it was sad. And I think most of the country shares that. I think our president should serve out this term. I think he's able to do so. The fact that he's running for another one is preposterous. And I think most of the country recognizes that. And frankly, I don't think it should be politicized. I think we should honor him, and he should preserve his legacy and pass the torch in the next election.
You said it appears a crime was committed. Do you believe that Robert Hur should have charged?
Well, based on what I read, he said there was evidence, but he recognized that by prosecuting it, they called him an elderly man with a fading memory and would be too sympathetic in front of a jury. And I think there was a lot in that report that was unnecessary. It may be true, but still unnecessary, and it saddens me.
That part that you're talking about, he wrote, Mr. Biden would likely present himself to a jury, as he did during our interview of him, as a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. That language, and just generally reading the report, there were aspects of it that seemed that they were no fans necessarily of Donald or of President Biden. Do you think that that was fair? Should the special counsel have gone there in justifying his decision to actually not bring charges?
Like I said, I thought it was unnecessary. I think you make your case. Yes, you're doing it. No, you're not. I think there was more in there than necessary. I think everything stated is fairly self-evident if people are watching, for goodness sakes, in just the last 24 hours. But that's not the point. I don't think it was necessary. I think it's too bad. But on the other hand, Abby, I mean, it's sad to watch our president at an age in life and stage in life when people decline. It's not his fault. He's a great man. He saved our country. I think he's led ably. But I'm focused more on the future. Why are we even talking about Donald Trump and Joe Biden right now? An 81-year-old, a 77-year-old, one is under federal indictment, one stored classified documents in his garage in open containers.
Well, the reason we're
clearly
talking
have
about
such
them,
a problem of the past,
Congressman.
but I just want to make a case to, like, why don't we move to the future?
Let me ask you. I mean, I understand that that's the case that you're making to voters, but so far that has not worked. You are running against Joe Biden. There have been several primaries. You haven't gained any traction. So it seems that the voters are saying, with clear voices, that they're fine with Joe Biden. At least the Democratic ones are.
Yeah, 4% in South Carolina, 100,000 or so in New Hampshire. I mean, we're talking about a tiny percent. That's actually, I'm glad you bring it up, because we have such a crisis of participation in our country, Abby. The fact is, everybody complains in November about the choices we have between two parties, and only like 10, 15% vote in primaries. My call to action, my invitation, I don't care if you vote for me. I do care if you vote. The fact is, we have very few people opining. They tend to be the very base voters of the far right, the far left. And the fact of the matter is, moderate, reasonable, center-right, center-left candidates, in this day and age, between the two parties, you're right, don't get a good shot.
But even among the 4%, I mean, how many of the 4% did you get?
1.7%.
And that is a very, I mean, it's an infinitesimally small amount, which suggests that if you cannot, that's why primaries exist.
Yeah.
If you can't perform in a primary, it suggests that you wouldn't be able to perform in a general. I think that there's a question about the viability of your candidacy, despite what you're saying are the shortfalls of Joe Biden.
I can only laugh because the viability of my candidacy, when we just watched the President of the United States confuse Francois Mitterrand, who died in 1996, who couldn't remember the name of Hamas at a press conference about Israel and Hamas, who tonight confused the President of Mexico about opening the Rafah Gate. I mean, Abby, and my candidacy is the one that is. I mean,
what I'm saying simply is that you haven't made the case to voters.
Because I haven't been platformed, Abby. That's how the system works.
Platformed by whom? You've been on this show.
Tonight, MSNBC is talking all about how this is just a political hit job, not talking about what Americans really, really are thinking when they look at our president, a good man who's clearly in decline. And yes, and I'm grateful. This is, I think, our third time together. I appreciate that. But our system is designed to present the coronated candidate, to ensure that as few people vote in primaries as necessary, and then give people the choices. And that's why all I'm saying is the only way to take on the system is to encourage people to pay attention and to participate. Anybody who's watching the President of the United States right now and believes that he can serve in the most important seat in the world until January of 2029, Abby, I mean, I don't think I'm the only one saying the quiet part out loud. In Washington, I'm the only one telling the truth. But in this country, 70% of our fellow Americans don't want either of these men. And I think our system is very broken and very flawed that we would somehow be elevating two men who absolutely should not be serving as president.
It is incredibly difficult, and as you are living through, to challenge an incumbent.
Sure.
And I think that is part of the equation, too. The broader question, my final one to you, with just the time that we have left, is all that you just laid out is, in fact, out there. But voters are still saying that they will cast their ballot for Joe Biden.
Sure.
So what do you think is missing? Are voters putting aside their concerns about Joe Biden's age?
No, in fact,
because it seems like that's what they're doing.
Well, we've had 3 states vote so far, Abby, and Joe Biden has been in Washington for 50 years. He became a United States Senator when this guy was 3 years old. Everybody knows Joe Biden. 5% of the country knows me so far. And I'm going to do what you do when you run for president. I show up, I meet voters, I answer the press's questions, I do gaggles, I do town halls, I do debates, I show up in cafes and coffee shops.
And you'll do
I'll
that for
introduce
how long will you continue?
I'll go all the way to the convention.
All the way to the convention.
And I'll tell you why. Because my party should have anticipated what is happening right now. I was trying to say the quiet part out loud for many, many months. I encouraged the president 1 year ago to pass the torch. This was so clear what was going to happen. And now we're in a circumstance where it is President Biden and me in the Democratic primary. I think it's important to have options. I'll introduce myself. I would be thrilled to introduce myself to voters. Come meet me. I want to hear what's on your mind. It's time for change. We got costs that are out of control, chaos at our border around the world, and a president who clearly should serve out this term and then pass the torch.
We appreciate you joining us
Thank you,
tonight,
Abby. I do appreciate it, too.
Dean Phillips. Laura?
Thank you so much. Special Counsel Robert Hur, well, he had some harsh words, but no criminal charges for President Biden. The report says prosecutors would not be able to prove Biden intended to break the law while handling classified documents from when he was vice president. Here with me now to talk about all of this is CNN senior political analyst Gloria Borger, former White House lawyer James Schultz, along with CNN legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Elliot Williams. We've got a lot to talk about. This day, if you thought was going to be at the Supreme Court, you had another thing coming. It's been a lot more about these issues today. And this report, I want to go to you first, Gloria. It characterizes Biden's memory as, quote, very significantly limited in interviews. They even talk about his failure to possibly recall the date of his beloved son Beau's passing. You have interviewed Biden. He even took out about this very issue. Listen to what he had to say in firing back, and then I want to hear your take. Okay.
There's even reference that I don't remember when my son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? Frankly, when I was asked the question, I thought to myself, it wasn't any of their damn business.
When you hear that, Gloria, I mean, you interviewed President Biden about the passing.
About Beau, and tonight he spoke about it, but when I was interviewing him, he actually took Beau's rosary out of his pocket and showed it to me. This is not a man who is going to forget the day that his son died. I think what we saw tonight was anger about why they were asking him about it. What did that have to do with documents? And Joe Biden does have a temper. And I think what we saw tonight publicly is what I'm sure his aides have seen privately. And I bet he was the person who wanted to go out there and say that, because I think that was very, very meaningful to him when they accused him of not remembering when his son died.
Let me turn to you, James, on this, because, first of all, the special counsel report is due to Congress. That's part of what they have to do. It's not as if he can just say, you know, yay or nay, thumbs up or thumbs down. But I heard a lot of people react to the inclusion of things outside of the scope of why he declined to prosecute, perhaps, as, well, they called it kind of Comey-esque, for lack of a better term. But he does talk about the memory issues as it relates to his ability to make the case in front of a jury. When you saw that inclusion, what went through your mind?
So look, when they're referencing his memory generally, that's something that contextually matters because they use that as a basis not to prosecute, right? Not to bring charges. So did they have to put in that it was specifically the issue relating to his son? Probably not. But what that does show is kind of the gravity of the issues relative to his memory, right? I mean, the folks interviewing him, they're probably not making this up, right? That he may have forgotten that. And contextually, that matters relative to such a big decision as to whether to, once he's finished being president, charging a president of the United States with a crime.
But I'm not a lawyer, but the question that I have for all of you lawyers here is, why does that have to be included in a decision not to prosecute? Either you make a decision to prosecute and you say why, or you say we're declining prosecution and that's the end of the case. Why does that, why
That's
is
part of
that?
the why.
Well, let me ask
why
you,
do you need to explain
well, let me
why?
ask you that, Elliot, because she's making a point of, the distinction between there's the political conversation that everyone's talking about, and then there's the prosecutorial discretion. And on that prosecutorial discretion aspect of it, is it relevant?
Well, yes and no. It's when prosecutors write what's called a prosecution memorandum, laying out the reasons why they're charging or not charging an individual, making a recommendation. Certainly, they lay out this is the law, and these are the facts that we have available to us, and this is how we intend to prove the information that we would charge in an indictment. Now, what would have been legally relevant is these are the charges, this is the evidence we have, and this witness may or may not be able to provide us with useful evidence or testimony. Saying it's because he's an addled old man or whatever language they used is simply not relevant and excessive and unnecessary. And I feel that we might have learned the lesson about what happens when prosecutors in contentious political elections start weighing in with detailed analysis of sullying up the people they're investigating. We saw it in 2016 and sort of saw some of that here. Yes, they had to say why they weren't bringing charges, but the sort of the specific, almost personal attacks on the person they were investigating probably went a little far.
Let me play. I almost said special devil's advocate for a moment, and just thinking about. I know when I've done trials, right? I think to myself, the witnesses I'm going to put on, who's going to present sympathetic, who's going to allow me to build my case and prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And there might be talk about this when there's, say, a mother of a particular victim or a defendant. You have to weigh how you're going to approach that person in direct and cross-examination, right? You think about how they're going to present. And so I wonder to what extent they were considering that aspect of it. But I also want to tell you what Donald Trump had to say, because he's weighed in. Is anyone surprised? No? Okay. Well, shock? Okay, great. Well, he said this on the special counsel decision. He posted on Truth Social. And he said, this case is much more severe than the Mar-a-Lago documents case against him, calling it, quote, two-tiered system of justice and selective prosecution. Jim, when you hear this, the idea of a double standard, do you think it's true?
Look, this is much different than the Trump case, right? The difference here, and they laid it out. Biden was very cooperative. He turned over the documents. He turned over the evidence. His lawyers made it very, very readily available. And in Jack Smith's case, we've seen facts that Donald Trump didn't cooperate. Donald Trump withheld evidence. Donald Trump didn't turn everything over. So I don't think Donald Trump, had he just kind of turned everything over, made it accessible, I don't know that we're where we are in that documents case with Donald Trump today, had he done what Joe Biden did.
Just one more thing. Back to this, what goes into a prosecution memo and doesn't. And you used a great example there of a mother. If we're going to put a witness on, might this person's feelings or passions be of such that we can't put them in front of a jury? Now, if you were to write a prosecution memorandum and saying, because this person's status as a mother, we think they might be a bad witness, fine. She had a child out of wedlock is an additional fact that does not need to go in there. It just serves to sully up and dirty up the person you're investigating, and that's what some of the information here did. It sort of went beyond what you needed to establish the case.
And Laura mentioned Comey, and of course we all recall when Comey decided not to prosecute Hillary Clinton, he then went on to talk about how reckless she was with her emails and went on, and that, a lot of Democrats believe, really hurt her in the election. So I think, it's the same kind of thing. How far do you go in telling the public why you made these decisions?
On top of that, there was a press conference in addition, like at least to the credit of special counsel.
We remember that moment. You know what? We're going to compile a court of public opinion on this very issue. So stay tuned later in the show to hear what the American public, strangers, thinking about this whole issue. Stick around. Abby?
Lots more ahead. Up next, we'll discuss the political implications of this report and all of its findings. Plus, the plaintiff in the Supreme Court battle over Trump staying on the ballot will join us live, as it seems that the justices may very well side with the former president. And moments away from the polls closing in Nevada, this is CNN's special live coverage.
Your memory has gotten worse, Mr. President?
My memory is not good. My memory is fine.
Do you fear that this report is only going to fuel further concerns about your agency?
Only by some of you.
And new tonight, President Biden responding there to the findings of the special counsel's classified documents case against him. This is coming after the special counsel decided to not bring charges against him. For more on this, my roundtable is here with me. Anna, I'm going to put you on the spot because I know you've been around President Biden physically in person recently. The man who's described in the special counsel's report, the man who you saw there at that press conference, and the man that you've seen in person, which Joe Biden is it? And did he do a good enough job of convincing Americans that he has all of his faculties?
I saw him yesterday, right? He was here in New York for a fundraiser that I was a guest at. Look, I've known Joe Biden for, I don't know, 25, 30 years. Is he the same Joe Biden that I knew 30 years ago? No. Am I the same person that I knew 30 years ago? No. I don't have the same youth either. This today, I think, is a press conference where he was angry, he was emotional. What people are going to remember is the fact that he misstated the difference between the president of Egypt and the president of Mexico.
That was a major
that was a major gaffe at a moment when he's pushing back on, I'm good, right? So it was a major gaffe, and people are going to remember that. But I'm going to say this over and over again. This comes down to a binary choice. And the binary choice is Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. And Donald Trump makes as many gaffes, probably just not as much scrutiny as Joe Biden does. I mean, last week, he confused Nikki Haley for Nancy Pelosi. These are actually people he knows, right? And he's been working with. And so how do you justify that? But it gets less scrutiny than Joe Biden. Joe Biden can't be making these kind of mistakes. I think this is one that's going to be very memorable. I think this is one that's going to stick, that's going to hurt. I think that you're going to see it in campaign ads. But I will tell you, the Joe Biden I have seen is good. The Joe Biden I've seen is not the Joe Biden I knew 30 years ago, but it is a Joe Biden I trust to be my president today, and in a year, and in 2 years, and in 3 years.
And Jamal, you worked at the White House. Yeah. You had the pleasure of being in the communications staff. Yeah. In a moment like this. They decided to put him out just hours after this went down. They decided to let him take questions. He makes that major gaffe that Anna was talking about. Was this a strategic mistake?
No, they absolutely made the right call putting him out today, because that would have given the President of the United States as the last word on what happened throughout the day. He was able to forcefully push back on some of the questions that were in that report. He was able to then talk about his son in a very emotional way. I mean, he got a little angry, and I think that energy plays well. Now, I think the CC comment, everyone's been talking about this. You know, Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, was talking to Kristen Welker on Meet the Press on Sunday and confused Iran for Israel. People do this all the time. I do it. I'm sure other people have done it. So I just don't know if that's a fair critique of the president, even though obviously this question today is about whether or not he's got the mental acuity.
It's not in a vacuum. I think that's part of the problem, right? Is that this is about, is he pushing back consistently on the narrative, or is he reinforcing?
I mean, let me just say this. I was in the White House for a year. I saw the president in public settings several times a week. I saw him in private settings. He's very adept. He worked his way through issues. He talks to people in a really kind of compelling way. I think that this is publicly, he always makes mistakes when he's on stage.
Question, do you think this was a call by the press team, or do you think this was Joe Biden's call? Because I think this was Joe Biden angry at those findings, Joe Biden getting very riled up about what they said about him not remembering Beau's death, and Joe Biden saying, I'm going out there and I'm doing that. What do you think? I'm sorry, Abby. I know you're the moderator.
That was a very good question. What do you think, Jamal?
So I talked to the White House tonight. They're feeling like this was the right call. They feel like...
But who made it?
They feel like they're angry. Nobody said who made it. Nobody told me who made it. I didn't ask.
Well, the staff would be the first to throw the principal under the bus if they didn't make the call.
And I know these people pretty well, so they would have said, boy, I think that was probably not the right thing to do. They all feel good. They also feel like the anger worked. And they're also very angry at Robert Hur for what it is that he did today. He's not qualified to make these kind of judgments, and he made these kind of statements in a document that he should not have made these statements in.
I don't want to, but he's not qualified. I mean, he's been hired.
He's a medical doctor. He's a lawyer who was supposed to be, and a prosecutor who was supposed to have said whether or not the president committed a crime. He said the president does not have a case.
Do you have to be a medical doctor
to make a judgment that someone said to you in an under oath interview, I don't remember when I was vice president? I mean, do you have to have a medical degree to report that in a document?
I think we heard Anderson tonight have a conversation about, like, when did I start at CNN? This
he
happens
was vice
very
president
often
of the
to people.
United States of America.
I wasn't going to say it, but the elections are every 4 years, so that makes it a little easier.
Yeah, but he could also be like,
All right,
I don't
Joe,
know,
I'll
was
let
that like
Joe.
2009, 2012? What year was that?
I think we just need to acknowledge the obvious. Number one, those words in that document that's over 300 pages are damning. I think that if we are trying to tell people that we have to trust our institutions on a daily basis, if we're telling people that we are also supposed to take Joe Biden at his word, it is his own words that have been recorded by an official steward of the court in the process of trying to determine whether a crime was committed. And it is the opinion of the Department of Justice that is not in the interest of justice to explore bringing charges because they do not believe that the man who is currently president has the mental capacity to stand trial. That is effectively what has been imparted through the words of that document. So either we should take the DOJ at their word, or perhaps something even more pernicious has happened, that the DOJ has undermined the actual confidence that the world has in the president of the United States. So either way you want to slice it, this is really serious, and I think that we can't just poo-poo it as to when did Anderson start at CNN. It's much bigger than that. It's much more serious than that. No disrespect to Anderson, we all love him, but the point is,
Anderson's somewhere wondering why is he part of this conversation.
Catching strays. Anderson's just catching strays tonight.
Look, I think your point is valid, that we're having a conversation also about what was in that document, which has to do with Joe Biden. But I want to make this other point. The document also says that they did not believe that there was evidence beyond a reasonable doubt that Joe Biden committed a crime that is chargeable here. It did say that. So beyond a reasonable doubt is the standard in a criminal case.
True,
like
but I
this.
will say that everyone knows that we give prosecutors discretion, and good prosecutors at every level do not bring charges when they don't believe they have a pathway to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. And in this particular case, a significant contributing factor was his perception of the acuity of Joe Biden. So again, we should take no pleasure in this. We should not be sitting here trying to gloat. This is really much bigger than any type of campaign ad that can be cut. The Department of Justice has said in an official document that has been stamped and dated and will stand the test of time that it is their opinion that Joe Biden is not fit. You cannot push that under the rug. That is a question that has to be answered and has to be addressed.
We also can't push under the rug that this is a Trump-nominated special prosecutor
so now,
hold on a second, who let the president off the hook and may have perhaps been just giving a little red meat to his Republican friends as he let the president off the hook.
Our institutions have not been weaponized. Wednesdays, the institutions have been weaponized. It's hard to keep track.
The principal question of the day is, did anything that happened today in this document or in this press conference help or hurt this number, that 3/4 of the American people before today had moderate or significant concerns about the president's mental acuity and fitness for this office? I would submit that at the conclusion of this document and at the conclusion of this press conference, that number certainly didn't get any better. It probably got worse, and it firmly shifted the conversation even further towards his own vice president. Because I would say, and I don't know how many people on this panel believe it, there aren't too many Americans who are going to look at this and say, this guy is up to serving for 5 more years as President of the United States. I think Vice President Harris became squarely an issue in this election today. She already was getting there, and now it's even more important.
Everyone's
got the intellect, the political values, and the ability to serve as President of the United States and do a very
Everyone, stick around.
The scrutiny on Trump is so much different than the scrutiny on
You don't think
Biden.
Donald Trump gets any scrutiny?
I don't think scrutiny. I don't think the gaffes he makes. I mean, he says the stupidest things on a daily basis. He confuses people. He's talking about whales. He's talking about windmills. He makes absolutely zero sense on a daily basis.
Your entire job during the day is to have a show in which Donald Trump's gaffes are endlessly mocked every day. You don't think he gets the same scrutiny as Joe Biden?
#1 talk show in America.
Everyone, we're going to leave it there for now.
We're gonna love to talk about
For now, there's so much more to talk about. Laura, I'm going to let cooler heads down in Washington prevail.
Man, you're going to toss to me after that? I don't know. I could watch a little bit more of that conversation. I want to hear the end of that, but we'll go back to you soon. Wow, what a great panel. So intriguing and fascinating to hear everyone's commentary. Ahead, though, a monumental day at the Supreme Court. Think about another conversation we're all leaning in for, those 9 justices. They seem skeptical of the argument about kicking Trump off the ballot. I'm going to talk to the plaintiff in that case. Plus, it's an election night. The polls are closing in Nevada, where the former president is expected to speak very soon. Everyone stand by. Well, now to Nevada, where the caucuses wrapped up just moments ago and where Donald Trump is anticipating a win and then 26 more delegates. Let's go to John King at the Magic Wall with more. John, what are you seeing tonight?
At the moment, no votes out of Nevada, but let me just pop it up. You see it out here. Let's bring it up. This is the safest bet in Vegas tonight, though, Laura. This is going to fill in Trump red, and it's going to fill in Trump red pretty soon. How can we say that with such certainty? The only 2 people competing in the caucuses are Donald Trump and Ryan Binky. Donald Trump is going to win. He has the state party very much in his favor. He's going to win, as you noted, 26 delegates at stake. So if you come back out, 37 delegates coming into the night, that's because he won Iowa with 51% of the vote, and then he won New Hampshire with 54+% of the vote, and Donald Trump now is going to be undefeated. He's going to win the 3rd contest tonight as we talk. As we continue the conversation, you'll see any minute now. The polls closed a few minutes ago, 9 minutes ago, so we'll get some votes relatively quickly, and we'll watch. But look, Laura, by the end of the night or early morning, Donald Trump is going to be 3-0. It's unprecedented in modern times. The same candidate wins Iowa and New Hampshire. Now he's going to win the 3rd contest, and the question is going to be, he is going to say, as he already said earlier today, why is Nikki Haley still in the race? She says she's not going anywhere.
Well, on that point, I mean, we are 3 contests into this race. If he does, in fact, as you say he will, get Nevada, that's then 3-0, and people will say that it's all over. Nikki Haley is being steadfast and doubling down and saying she's not going anywhere, including all the way to South Carolina. What do you make of the trajectory of all this?
Well, if you look at the momentum, trajectory is going to be Trump red, Trump red, Trump red. Let's go to South Carolina. So let's just bring up South Carolina. The hard part for Nikki Haley is, yes, she was the governor there. Yes, she's actually quite popular among Republicans. But look at 2016, all but 2. Donald Trump won all but 2 of the 48 counties in South Carolina back in 2016 when he was brand new on the political scene. That was his 2nd win in South Carolina. This is 8 years later. He's even more popular in South Carolina. Marco Rubio won here, right? In Richland County, which is where the capital is in Columbia. Marco Rubio won out here, Charleston County, which is along the coast. But Laura, I'm just back from South Carolina, interviewing voters there. Trump is more popular now than he was then. They say they like Nikki Haley. They just love Donald Trump. Is it mathematically possible? She has, 16 days left to try to change minds? It is possible. But if Trump goes 4-0, she says she's in the race to stay. But it's just pretty hard if you have 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, we'll still be early in the delegate chase. Yes, she is raising money. So she says she's going to stay to Super Tuesday and beyond. There are a lot of Republicans who want somebody in the race just in case, they keep saying. But look, this is Donald Trump's party. The only way to prove it is to beat him somewhere. She's not going to do that tonight. Then we go to South Carolina.
John King, when you're at the Magic Wall, democracy gets a rush of adrenaline. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Up next, historic arguments before the United States Supreme Court. Lawyers arguing that Donald Trump should remain on the ballot in Colorado, and Supreme Court justices, frankly, seem receptive in their questioning. The plaintiff is in the case, and she will join us next. Well, some might say it's obvious what's about to happen. Well, unless today's oral arguments were a Kaiser Sose-like head fake. God, I love that movie. Well, the Supreme Court seems pretty darn likely to side with Donald Trump in his 14th Amendment fight to stay on the ballot. There's a lot of nodding and agreement, not just from the conservatives when the former president's own lawyer made his case. One, they seem to be content to go along with the assertion that Congress has to enforce the 14th Amendment. Two, even the liberals on the bench were hesitant to set a dramatic precedent as letting states simply take a candidate off the ballot. And three, they were focused on the kind of butterfly effect on democracy that this decision could unleash and make it, well, problematic in the future. You got to have a fourth one, don't we? The justices somehow didn't really get into the ultimate question. What question is it? Did he actually engage in an insurrection? Now, of course, it's hard to read the tea leaves in full, and the Supreme Court, like Bobby Brown, will exercise their prerogative on all fronts. But I want to bring in Krista Kafer, a longtime Colorado Republican, who actually is one of the plaintiffs in this case and was censored by her county GOP for having the audacity to even be a part of this lawsuit. Krista, so nice to see you in person.
It is great to see you in person, and I'm very proud of that censor. I also... I like the fact that you brought in a little Kaiser Sose reference. That was quite nice.
I mean, you know, we do a lot of big things here on CNN. That's one of the things we do. But I will tell you, when we look at this, I wanted to be in that room where it was happening, to get a sense of what was happening in that room. We were listening. There's no actual visual cameras allowed there. You were in that room. What was it like?
Quiet. It
Really?
was, yeah, it was just so strange. And then, you know, occasionally Justice Kagan was kind of funny, so you would hear like a little laughter ripple across the audience, but a lot of dark suits, a lot of silence, and a lot of seriousness given the gravity of the situation.
You mentioned Justice Kagan. I want to play for you something that she repeatedly was questioning, and it had to do with the fact that it was Colorado as one state that was making a decision like this that may have had the impact of disenfranchising or altering or influencing other voters' choices. Listen to what she had to say.
I think that the question that you have to confront is why a single state should decide who gets to be president of the United States. In other words, you know, this question of whether a former president is disqualified for insurrection to be president again is, you know, just say it. It sounds awfully national to me.
What did you make of that?
I understand her skepticism because it does become very disruptive, right? One state makes a ruling. What does the next state, you know, how does that affect then this national scene? I get her skepticism. But, you know, just because something is disruptive doesn't make it wrong. And I would say that if they rule with us, it could be disruptive. But if they rule against us, I think it could be dangerous. To have somebody who has been involved in insurrection able to run again, what does that say to future presidents? What does that say to anyone who might lose an election and decide they're not too happy with that loss? They're willing to do whatever it takes, including violence, inciting violence to be able to stop that peaceful transfer of power. Disruptive, dangerous. I'll take disruptive.
You know, interestingly enough, in this tit-for-tat era that we find ourselves in repeatedly, there is a thought that if this is allowed to happen, for Trump to be taken off the ballot, well, then the next time somebody has an issue with any policy dispute or otherwise of any president, including Biden, that they'll do the same to him.
You know, I've thought of that, and it's because I was a congressional staffer during impeachment, right? So President Clinton was impeached, and some said, you know, we've really lowered the bar. We're going to see impeachment used a lot more after this. And it's true. We have seen it used for frivolous reasons. It seems like anytime somebody runs for president, somebody else is already drawing up impeachment papers. But let's keep in mind that it also has been used for legitimate reasons, as in insurrection, as in influence peddling. It has been used for real reasons. We need to make sure that the 14th Amendment, third clause, is used for legitimate reasons, that they don't just stick it on a shelf and say it's going to be problematic, because we need it used when insurrection happens, and insurrection has happened.
That's a really important point because, of course, the clause engaging in insurrection is as important as whether the person's taken an oath, whether they're an officer of the United States. We remember all these arguments. But there was some skepticism about the Supreme Court having to wade into whether Trump had indeed engaged in an insurrection. In fact, it was almost an hour into the oral argument before we even heard the word raised. Listen to this moment, because when it was raised, I think it was a discussion between Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson and Jonathan Mitchell representing Trump. Listen to this.
For an insurrection, there needs to be an organized, concerted effort to overthrow the government of the United States through violence. And this
so
riot
your point
that
is that a chaotic effort to overthrow the government is not an insurrection?
No, we didn't concede that it's an effort to overthrow the government either, Justice Jackson. Right? None of these criteria were met. This was a riot. It was not an insurrection.
What was your reaction to that moment? And also, take me in that courtroom.
So I loved that. I loved her comment. I thought she was terrific. I actually thought the two newest justices asked some of the best questions. And, you know, Does it have to be organized? Can it just be a chaotic riot? The fact is it was a deliberate action to stop the peaceful transfer of power. You know, riots have happened throughout our nation's history, but this is the first one I can think of since the Civil War in which a group of people did not like an outcome, an individual especially, Donald Trump did not like the outcome, decided he wanted to disenfranchise 80 million voters who voted for his opponent, pushed that false narrative to the point of violence, to the point of insurrection, and we saw our Capitol, a place I used to work at, attacked by thugs, basically at his command. I don't know if it's chaotic, I don't know if it's organized, but either way, it's insurrection.
I wonder, I mean, we've talked a couple times since this case has gone down. You have not been treated kindly, shall we say, by so many people. Sitting in that courtroom today in front of those Supreme Court justices, did it feel worth it, even if the result is not what you want?
It did feel worth it. And I kept thinking of that Lincoln quote way back when of, we need to do right, and of course I'm not going to give it justice, but we need to do right by the light that God has given us to see what is right, and we must continue on. And I thought about that. I thought about that in posterity, regardless of what happens. When people look back and say, you know, I sure wish somebody had done something. I wish somebody had tried to do something. The fact is that we did try. Whether we succeed or not isn't the issue. We took the Constitution and rule of law seriously, and we wanted to hold this individual responsible, accountable, and to preserve our democracy. We did what we could.
It's no small feat to have the Supreme Court want to grapple with an issue and a question you've raised. Very, very important. Krista Kafer, thank you so much. Abby?
More on the three big stories that we are following tonight, including more results from Nevada. Their Republican caucuses are tonight. Trump is expected to speak for the first time since that Supreme Court argument this afternoon, and Biden has been cleared from the special counsel case. All of that up next.
Tonight, a split screen of epic proportions. You're watching Democracy in Action tonight. Nevada Republicans register for their choice for November.
In just a few minutes, we will go live to Las Vegas, where Donald Trump is expected to add an important delegate victory on his march to the nomination for the Republican nomination. It follows a consequential day for Trump and his lawyers inside of the Supreme Court and what appears to be a bench inclined to side with Trump's ability to stay on that ballot.
And by the way, Abby, in case that was not enough news for everyone, Joe Biden, the president of the United States, venting his frustration at the special counsel who decided not to indict him. But did he decide to add gallons of fuel to already burning questions about his age and ability to be the president of the United States? I'm Laura Coates in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on what's been, well, a marathon day, Abby, of consequential stories.
To say the absolute least, Laura. I'm Abby Phillip in New York, and today the Supreme Court stepped into the spotlight and a direct role into the 2024 presidential contest. Judge by what we heard, and the justices, they seem poised to preserve Trump's name on the ballot. Now, you can call that a big win for the Trump campaign.
And you can call this an in-kind donation for Trump. I mean, the special counsel says that Joe Biden did willfully retain classified materials, but why he won't charge him, pretty stunning, and will create all kinds of chatter about if Biden is still able to do the job he's running for again. The reason, by the way, Robert Hur gave for not bringing charges in part was that Joe Biden might be sympathetic to jurors and because his memory was not at its peak and might be far gone on certain areas.
There's so much more on all of these stories in just minutes, but first, on to Nevada, where the caucuses wrapped up just a few minutes ago and where Donald Trump is anticipating a win, probably a big one, and 26 more delegates. Let's go straight to John King, who's over at the Magic Wall with more. So, John, what are we seeing? Anything coming in just yet?
We are seeing the early votes come in, Abby, and to your point of what Donald Trump expects, guess what? He's going to get it. Look right there. You see Trump red starting to fill it on the map. Let's pop it out, show you Nevada. It's very early. We have about 1% of the vote counted. The two biggest counties, obviously Clark down here, 75% of the state population lives in Las Vegas and the suburbs around it. Washoe County up here with Reno. Trump's doing quite well in both. You see he's got 96% of the vote so far. Again, it's early, but this we expect a romp. We expect a romp tonight. In Vegas, he's getting Clark County, which includes Vegas, he's getting 99% at the moment. You come up here to Washoe, he's getting 96%. If you round up the Texas businessman, Ryan Binkley, the only other person on the ballot. So to your point, Abby, number one, if you come out to the full map, Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada. That will make Trump 3-0. That's never happened in modern times that somebody wins Iowa and then New Hampshire. Now he's going to win Nevada as well, the same candidate, 3-0. You mentioned 26 delegates at stake. You need 1,215 to win. So Nikki Haley's right when she says, whoa, it is very early in this process. But here's another way to look at it. Coming into tonight, Donald Trump was winning 56% of the delegates. That percentage is going to go up because he's going to get, if not 100%, very close to 100% of those Nevada delegates. So if you want to prove it's not Donald Trump's party, at some point you need to beat him. You need to beat him in the states so you can start to catch up in the delegate count. That is not happening at the moment. One more click to see if more has come in. No, we're still at 1%, but you can expect, Abby, this to continue throughout the night. 96% of the vote for Donald Trump at the moment. 3-0. We go on to South Carolina next in 16 days. Nikki Haley says she's in. That's her home state. She says she's in for that and beyond. But Donald Trump made the argument even before that turned red. He thinks it's time for her to get out. There'll be some pressure. And, of course, the anti-Trump forces, as you well know, Abby, will pressure her to keep in, stay on.
So, John, I want to backtrack just a little bit for those who may not have been paying attention or are probably wondering, why are we talking about Nevada for the second time in a single week? Who is on the ballot even tonight in that state?
Right, and so we're talking about it for a second time in a week. Let me go back in time. We'll go back to Tuesday. Tuesday, they had a primary. The state decided to have a primary, but no delegates were at stake. So it's essentially a beauty contest, right? And so Donald Trump did not file for that ballot. The state Republican Party said if you wanted to participate in the caucus, you can't be on the primary ballot. Nikki Haley did decide to file for the primary ballot. Again, no delegates at stake. She didn't spend any money on advertising. She didn't campaign there. So she says it's meaningless, but it's embarrassing when none of these candidates get 63% of the vote and you get 30% of the vote. Again, it doesn't count for anything, but she would have loved for this to be yellow, to say, look, thousands of voters came out to say they want me, not Donald Trump. That didn't happen. That was the primary on Tuesday. This is where we are today. Only Trump and the Texas businessman Ryan Binkley. Now, Ron DeSantis had filed for the caucuses. He's long gone from the race. He was going to participate, but he's long gone. So it's essentially Trump at the moment, and you see what's happening right there. And this is the one that matters. Yes, it can be confusing. Primary Tuesday, caucus Thursday. But in the end, delegates is how you win the nomination, and all the delegates are awarded tonight.
All right, John King, thank you very much. And now for a CNN projection. CNN projects that Donald Trump has won the Nevada caucuses. John King is still with us. John, we are so early in the night, but as you just laid out, this is a one-man race in Nevada.
Yeah, and let me say, as we go back, let's just look more closely at the results. Just leave Nevada up so people can see it in case more come in. And votes are starting to trickle in. This is a Republican Party event. They'll count as quickly as they can. It was a foregone conclusion, even if there were more candidates in the race. And I say that because the state party is for Trump. The state party organization is for Trump. They structured these caucuses to be for Trump. As you've heard a complaint from Nikki Haley that essentially the guy who keeps complaining about rigged elections stacked the deck here. People still have to show up. They still have to count their votes. Don't get me wrong about that. But this was a process that was set up by Trump's friends in the states, including those who run the party, to help Donald Trump. And you see the results. He's at 96% right now. Is he going to stay that high? Who knows? But he's going to stay way up there because, again, he's running against the very long-shot candidate, the Texas businessman Ryan Binkley, who's in the race. You know, he campaigned quite aggressively in Iowa, actually, but he's in the race for name and attention right there. So, again, we've now projected it. So Donald Trump won Iowa, then won New Hampshire. That never happens, not in modern times, the same candidate winning Iowa and New Hampshire. Now he's 3-0. And again, Abby, I know, yes, it's early in the process, and anti-Trump people will say, stop saying he's going to be the presumptive nominee with so many contests still to go. But my point is, this is his party now, and if you want to prove otherwise, you have to fill one of these states in, not Trump red. I know it's only 3, but South Carolina comes in 16 days. It's Nikki Haley's home state. If there's a place where you want to make a point that people are having second thoughts, you better do it at home.
Yeah, you got to put some points on the board. And as you pointed out, John King, Donald Trump and his campaign are trying to show that they are dominant in this Republican Party, not just in how he shows up in the polls, but how these primaries and caucuses are structured to his advantage. Right. John, thank you as always. We are still awaiting Trump to speak. But first, let's go to Laura Coates, who's in the court of public opinion.
Tonight, we're taking you inside of our own virtual courtroom, where our court of public opinion is going to hear legal arguments on the very big issues of the day. We're turning now to the special counsel report on Joe Biden's handling of classified documents. Special counsel Robert Hur has released his team's report on the investigation into the mishandling of Obama-era classified documents at 2 locations connected to now President Joe Biden. He did not charge Biden with a crime, but the report painted a picture of a forgetful commander-in-chief who failed to properly protect highly sensitive classified information. Exactly the picture that President Biden does not want out there as he campaigns for a second term. An angry president facing reporters at the White House tonight.
President Biden, something the special counsel said in his report is that one of the reasons you were not charged is because, in his description, you are a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. I'm
well-meaning, and I'm an elderly man, and I know what the hell I'm doing.
The question tonight, should President Biden have been charged? You hear what the American public thinks as 2 top lawyers lay out the arguments on both sides of that question. Norm Eisen was White House ethics czar in the Obama-Biden administration. He'll be arguing that Biden should not be charged. And Harry Litman, former U.S. attorney and former deputy assistant attorney general, will argue that Biden should have been charged. Then our jurors are going to weigh in. This is a diverse group of everyday Americans meeting tonight for the first time to share their opinions with each other and, of course, you. Now, Trump was charged. Biden was not. Is there a double standard? First, we'll talk with Harry Litman and make his case. Harry, why should, in your estimation, President Biden have been charged?
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen, in February of 2017, a month after leaving office, the former vice president was working on his memoirs with his ghostwriter. He had a lot of classified documents that had been taken from the White House that there's no doubt about. They were strewn about carelessly in a garage. You've seen the picture. But in a recorded conversation in February 2017, then Citizen Biden told his ghostwriter, and I quote, he had just found all this classified stuff downstairs. I just found all this classified stuff downstairs. Did Biden immediately call up the archives and say, oh gosh, I've got these documents I just found out and I want to return them to you? No. In fact, he talked about them with his ghostwriter, who didn't have security clearance, and he used them to write the memoir. And it's 100% obvious that he willfully retained classified material. You've heard evidence that he was more cooperative once it was found than Donald Trump was, and that's true. But that's got nothing to do with the basic charge of willfully retaining the documents. Donald Trump was charged with obstruction of justice, in addition, which we haven't sought to bring him here. At its core, this is a case about equal justice under law. It was fair for Trump to have been charged, but by the same token, it's also fair to charge Biden. They both willfully retained documents, and to not charge Biden here would simply be to inflame the partisan tensions in this country that have so plagued us. What's true for Trump is true for Biden.
Well, Norm, I wonder what your argument is. We're asking the question of whether Biden should or should not have been charged. Harry Litman says in this exercise that he should have been. What do you say?
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Joe Biden should not have been charged because he committed no crime. In America, we don't charge people when they haven't committed a crime. Please do not take my word for it. Listen to the words of Special Counsel Robert Hur, who spent over a year investigating this matter, reviewed thousands of documents, talked to a vast number of people. He stated, "We conclude that no criminal charges are warranted in this matter." Biden did nothing else than was considered normal for most of the duration of his long career. Again, as Mr. Hur, who was a Trump-appointed United States attorney, who spoke from the podium in the Trump administration, in the Trump White House. Here's what Mr. Hur had to say about that. Historically, after leaving office, many former presidents and vice presidents have knowingly taken home sensitive materials. My distinguished opponent tells you that the president had materials in his house that he shared as he was reviewing for his book. But here's what Mr. Hur says about that there was no proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and that they could have been stored by mistake and without his knowledge. Mr. Hur would not have charged him. This is apples and oranges with the situation of Donald Trump, where there's ample proof that Trump knew he had documents. He refused to cooperate. Hur points out Biden did cooperate. That shows criminal intent for Trump.
Jurors, you've now heard the two arguments about why they believe President Biden should have been charged and why they believe he should not have been charged. I want to turn to the jury now on this discrete issue. Do you think that President Biden should have been charged, knowing that President Trump also was? What do you think? Number three?
No, I don't. I think it's two different things. President Trump obstructed justice and then, I think, unfortunately, made himself look more guilty than maybe he was. And President Biden did cooperate. It's clear that there's a pattern of politicians taking home classified materials. Often in many judiciaries or justice systems, like, crimes come before them and they make a decision on whether they think it's enough to prosecute or not. And in this instance, that's not the case. So there's no smoke here.
You're
no
nodding.
fire.
Yeah, I agree. Vice President Pence was not charged. He had documents. It's unfortunate. It's happened over the years. But there is a precedent for not charging a president when there's a belief that some crime may have been committed. And that was the Mueller investigation. He did not exonerate Trump, but he did not charge him. So the issues, true, are different, but the end result is the same. So no, I don't think he should be charged.
Apples and oranges seems to be a theme. What do you say, juror number one?
I don't believe that he should be charged either. I think that there was also a difference in the personal documents. Some of them were classified documents, and some of them were his own personal notebooks. And so I think where he had handwritten notes, where he had written notes during meetings. And so I think that we kind of look at that and you say, well, what's considered classified and what's not classified if it's someone's personal notebook and they're writing their personal notes from a meeting. So I think that some of the documents that Donald Trump had were actually documents that he was maybe trying to keep for something in the future. I don't know, but those documents weren't necessarily from personal notes that he had taken. So I think that was also the difference in that. I think the only problem that I have with President Biden is that he did use some of his personal notebooks for help with writing his memoir. And so I think that some people may look at that and see that as, well, what was he actually trying to do there? And did he really know that he had these documents all the time as he said he did, or what?
So when you look at this issue, juror number four, on a point she's raised, is the fact that and the manner in which the documents were kept in comparison to, say, how Trump's documents at Mar-a-Lago were displayed, and we've seen the filings for that. Does that make a difference for you? Does the idea of the ghostwriter impact how you see this?
It doesn't at all. Listen, Biden, we know, is a well-mannered, old octogenarian man who apparently knows what he's doing. Clearly, there has been a history of politicians who have sort of been very lax about classified documents. Again, I think when we are comparing former President Trump and his classified documents in terms of the manner in which they were stored, the way he sort of went about using them are completely different here. And so there's nothing really to sort of charge President Biden with, perhaps lack of judgment, but that comes along with the territory of an octogenarian president.
Juror number two, you were nodding, and I do wonder for all of you in this consideration, you all seem to be talking about there being a pattern or a history of this happening in other contexts. Does that, to you, decide that we should never charge because it's happened before? What do you say?
No, it just means Congress needs to do its job and tighten up on the laws, and then they need to be enforced. But Congress doesn't seem to want to do a lot for the last 4 years except fight.
I think this is just really indicative of patriarchy, white male privilege. Like, they're used to being able to do these things. That Joe Biden has been in political office for a lot of years. He's used to having a lot of privileges. Donald Trump is a multimillionaire. He's used to having privilege and doing these types of things, and so have many of our Congress people, our politicians. They're used to having access to things that it's an old boys network, and now social media and the news and the way that we are now, it's more public, but this is not something that's new.
I'm interested that none of you have raised the issue of the nature of the documents. You've touched upon the idea of the classified, but I also wonder from the perspective of each of you, I would like to go down the line, does the fact that Biden was cooperative and alerted the DOJ and, of course, the entity that was looking at this issue, yes or no, does that assist you? Does that make a difference that he cooperated? Yes or no?
Yes, it does.
How about you?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, that seems to be definitive on that point, and we'll see what Congress ultimately will decide to do now that we know that there will not be a charge for now President Biden. Thank you again to Norm Eisen and Harry Littman, and a special thanks to our jurors in our Court of Public Opinion. If you would like to be a juror on the next Court of Public Opinion, get in touch with us at the address on your screen, Laura Coates, jury@cnn.com.
Fascinating conversation there. Much more coming up next. The chair of the Colorado Republican Party will join us to discuss that historic Supreme Court argument over Trump staying on the ballot. Plus, one of the potential vice presidential candidates made her audition tonight on CNN, saying that she would not certify the election on January 6th. And more from Nevada. CNN is projecting that Donald Trump has won the Republican caucuses. Tonight, the reality Republicans perceive clashing with the reality that actually exists. Elise Stefanik wants to be in the conversation about who could serve alongside Trump as vice president, so consider this part of her audition.
Had you been vice president on January 6, 2021, what would you have done?
I stood up for the Constitution. I believe it was
what would you have done if you were vice president?
I would not have done what Mike Pence did. I don't think that was the right approach.
That's brave talk if you're an election denier, but Mark Short, who was Mike Pence's top aide, posted this on social media. This right here is a photo of Elise Stefanik cowering in the gallery. His question to Stefanik, you mean you would have hidden in fear rather than do your job? We're back with our panel here in New York. Anna, I mean, it's no surprise. Look, if you want to be Trump's VP, it seems like there is a prerequisite here that you have to disavow what Mike Pence did, because Trump is still hung up on that.
It almost felt like an episode of The Apprentice, right? Where you have these people competing for Donald Trump's favor and who can suck up the most to Donald Trump. And right now I'd say that Tim Scott and Elise Stefanik are neck and neck on the suck up award, gold medal. I look at Elise Stefanik and I wonder what happened. What in the world happened to this woman? Because I remember when she was first elected, and youngest woman elected to Congress, and it's like she snapped, and it's like the invasion of the body snatchers, right? You see this person who's now comparing January 6th insurrectionists to hostages at a moment when we have been talking about hostages since October 7th, and we know what a hostage is, what it means to be beaten up and killed and tortured and held in tunnels. And she's doing that just to curry favor.
Because those are Trump's words. I mean, the question to what happened, she went from being a respectable young member of Congress to being someone in a conversation about being potentially Trump's VP.
Yeah, her profile and star in the Republican Party is rising rapidly. Apart from the conversation about Trump-specific stuff, her performance at the hearing with the college presidents vaulted her, and then the subsequent, dismissal of a couple of them, it vaulted her into a whole different stratosphere in terms of the Republican grassroots. She's long been a top surrogate, I think, for Trump, and even back during his impeachment trial, was one of his biggest defenders. But that moment a few months ago, when she took the reins of that committee hearing and put herself on another level, it has just dramatically increased her visibility. And put her, I think, in the top tier for the conversation.
Would she be a good pick for Trump?
I mean, I think she's an extraordinarily talented person. She's an ambitious person. And, I mean, the truth is Trump's got a lot of fairly good people to choose from, whether it's her or Tim Scott, who you mentioned. I mean, there's some talented young folks.
To me, the irony of Elise Stefanik is, yes, I agree with you that I think the hearing on anti-Semitism catapulted her
Absolutely.
To a different stratosphere. But at the same time, she is belittling what's happened in Israel and Gaza by comparing the January 6th insurrectionists to hostages at a time when hostages is something we equate with the people that are being held in tunnels for 4 months in Gaza.
I don't think she belittled it any more than Joe Biden did tonight when he called Israel's response over the top in his press conference. I mean, Joe
Biden has been working day and night every single day since October 7th to get those hostages released and to make sure that this does not
Joe,
he's walking it back every day.
Joe, I want to ask you this, because if you saw Elise Stefanik on a convention stage with Donald Trump holding his hand up, she's his VP, what does that say to you as a Republican about what direction this party is going in?
Tells me President Trump is serious about closing a close to 20-point gap with women. It tells me that he has picked one of the sharpest minds in the political party. I think, look, there's a lot to unpack about what's just been said and even what's being said about Congresswoman Stefanik online. Number one, I think holding up a photo of somebody who was a mother, who was a wife, who was a daughter, not knowing what in the world was happening on January 6th. None of us knew what was happening on January 6th. So I think to hold that up and say that
I know. I watched it on television. There were people trying to come into the Capitol.
Are you saying that she didn't know?
I'm talking about in that moment. Obviously, people didn't know exactly what was happening.
You're saying that she didn't know that outside of the Capitol, Trump supporters had gathered to try to
No.
break into the Capitol?
That is absolutely not what I said. I said that we had an aide to Mike Pence take a photo of the Congresswoman hiding, as many people were hiding, in the midst of a melee at the Capitol where people were trying to use the flag of this nation to break glass at the people's house. I think that is beyond the scope of what we should be doing when we try to have these conversations. As it relates to whether Elise Stefanik should be President Trump's vice president's pick, he would actually be to his benefit to pick Elise Stefanik. I think if you're trying to figure out what has happened to her, I'm exhausted by people trying to pretend that Republicans have been taken out of something out of the body snatchers, that President Trump has laid worms in the brains of Republicans. That is not what is happening. I think Republicans writ large are tired of being dismissed, tired of being disrespected, tired of there being these shifting goalposts where on one day Democrats are allowed to pretend that Ray Epps is a hero. On another day, they're going to sit here and pretend that anybody who was even in the presence of January 6th is somehow the same as somebody who quite literally forced their way into the building, broke glass, defecated in the building, all these different types of things. So I just think we have to be very specific, because where we are right now, where people in Congress are referring to Republicans writ large as insurrectionists, I think that's how we got into this place where the division has basically runneth over and gotten us to the rhetoric that has gotten people in a lot of trouble.
Well, she is an unrepentant election denier at this point.
I would disagree with that. She's an unrepentant election
I mean,
denier.
she said it tonight.
What she said was that she wants to make sure that the process is legal. I think that is what
she said that if she were Mike Pence, she would not have certified the 2020 election. That's what she said.
Well, I don't know the full remarks of what, because all we have is what we saw here. I will say this is not the first time that she has talked about the 2020 election. She's had an interview with NBC where she talked about wanting to make sure that the process in 2024 was a legal one and that she would not have gone about it in the way of Mike Pence. You would have to ask the Congresswoman herself to elaborate on that. But I do think
Mike Pence had one role, and it was to say the election is certify the electors that came from the states. That was his one role. He did it. If she were to do otherwise, she would be basically overturning the results of the states.
Again,
I want to give Jamal the last word, but I think we have to just put that on the table. She is not walking back that she believes that Mike Pence made the wrong call to do his constitutional duty on that day. That's a big deal.
Well, it is interesting that she deleted all of her press releases from the time around January 6th. And so because the internet is undefeated, people are going around and finding those tweets and press releases and talking about how she was
Not
critical.
people, Liz Cheney.
Right.
Liz Cheney, who she
Not just
kind
anybody.
of betrayed and shivved and got Liz Cheney's position in leadership now.
So it is very, the thing to me about all of this is people are shape-shifting in order to get in line with Donald Trump, who has been indicted in 91 counts, right? It's amazing. I can't imagine that we could possibly nominate somebody to be president of this country who has probably committed several crimes. And we are probably on the verge of putting him just a hair's breadth away from the White House again after he gave aid and comfort to these insurrectionists on January 6th.
All right, everyone, stick around for us. Laura, back to you.
Really interesting conversation. Up next, more on the historic Supreme Court arguments about whether Donald Trump should stay on Colorado's ballot. We'll talk with the head of the Colorado Republican Party about that very point next. The highest court in this land, hearing arguments in one of the most consequential cases in our entire nation's history. They were expressing some deep concerns on the bench about a state's ability to disqualify a candidate from seeking national office. Joining me now, the chair of the Colorado Republican Party, Dave Williams. He is opposed to the decision by the Colorado Supreme Court wanting to disqualify Trump from that ballot. Thank you for being here, Dave. We were all listening very intently to the Supreme Court, and I gotta be honest with you, we can't always read tea leaves, but they seem to be on your side of not having disqualified him. What was your impression today?
Yeah, I was actually in the Supreme Court chamber. I got to get a front row seat through it all, and it looked like the Supreme Court justices were pretty much skeptical of the petitioners and their claim. At one point, you even saw Justice Gorsuch really bringing Jason Murray, the petitioner's attorney, to task over some very critical points. So I think it shows that the momentum is on our side, and we're going to, knock on wood, we're going to have a 9-0 decision in our favor.
I'm not going to get bogged down in the legal arguments. I mean, the idea of officer versus office, office of, office under. There were a lot of nuanced discussions happening today. But big picture here, Dave, if he were to be disqualified and taken off of the ballot, and just say the justices decided that should happen, what's your biggest concern there?
Well, I mean, this was talked about even during oral arguments, but there would be a cascading effect all across the country where secretaries of state in other states would seek to disqualify Donald Trump in blue states. But there was also potential for retaliation where Republican states might very well disqualify Joe Biden. And that's just something that we shouldn't want to see in our country. We should want these candidates to be on the ballot so that ultimately the voters can decide.
There was a moment when I think Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson referenced if there is some ambiguity in all this, why not construe it in favor or against democracy, thinking about the voters deciding this issue. And I would note several justices seem to be signaling that Congress has some role here. They have the power to decide really whether there can be this cause of action to be brought or even be on the ballot. Do you think that this is up to the courts, Congress, or the voters?
Well, I mean, I think there are many different ways to look at this. Ultimately, in order to invoke the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, I think you do need an act of Congress. In fact, you already do have laws on the books. Jack Smith could have charged Donald Trump with insurrection. He chose not to. So absent that, I think ultimately it's got to be decided on that count by Congress. But when there is ambiguity, I think Justice Jackson alluded to this very eloquently, that we should leave it to the people to decide.
You know, this is obviously the gigantic elephant in the room is a general election come November, assuming Donald Trump secures that RNC nomination and is on that ultimate ballot. The attorney representing Colorado voters saying today that if the court sides with Trump, then their power may be done in terms of trying to remove him. Listen to what he had to say.
If this court concludes that Colorado did not have the authority to exclude President Trump from the presidential ballot on procedural grounds, I think this case would be done, but I think it could come back with a vengeance, because ultimately members of Congress may have to make the determination after a presidential election, if President Trump wins, about whether or not he's disqualified from office and whether to count votes cast for him under the Electoral Count Reform Act.
Gosh, if you were to follow that thread, I mean, are you worried about the potential chaos that that would cause?
I mean, I'm not. You'll see challenges during the certification process in Congress, but by and large, the majority of congressmen and senators usually certify the election. So I don't see that being a big deal. Ultimately, democracy will prevail in this, and if the people decide, both houses of Congress will certify it.
Oh, I look forward to the days when certification is a given. Dave Williams, thank you so much for your time today. We know there's a lot at stake, and this is a very nuanced and specialized argument. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Up next, we'll go live to Las Vegas. It's actually behind me right now. We expect Donald Trump to take the stage any minute after CNN has already now projected that Donald Trump won the Nevada Republican caucuses. Stay tuned. We've got more CNN special coverage next.
Any moment now, the former president will take a victory lap in Nevada, where he just picked up 23 delegates so far. CNN's Elena Treen is at the Trump headquarters in Las Vegas. Elena, how does the Trump campaign feel tonight?
They're feeling great, Abby. I mean, granted, this was a state they had expected to win. They knew they were going to likely sweep, especially given Nikki Haley was not on the ballot for the caucuses. She participated in the primary. But they still are feeling very good about tonight. And part of that is because it's capping off a great day for Donald Trump. I spoke with some of his advisors, and they argued it was one of the best days on the trail for him yet. And that's not just because of winning the Nevada caucuses and also the Virgin Island caucuses earlier today, but because of what we saw play out on the legal side of what has been wrapping Donald Trump, which is the special counsel's report from Robert Hur saying that Joe Biden willfully retained classified documents and mishandled classified documents, something that Donald Trump and his campaign have already seized on and plan to continue to use against Joe Biden moving forward, particularly the language around Joe Biden's mental fitness and what Hur described as maybe being a poor memory. That is really something already we've seen Donald Trump's team really try to push the narrative on, and I know they're going to continue to use that in the weeks ahead, especially as they pivot to a general election strategy. But then you also had the SCOTUS arguments, so the Supreme Court arguments, where Trump and his team really do feel like they are primed for a victory, where it seems like the justices do seem prepared to side with Donald Trump over Colorado. And so that, in addition to this big win in Nevada tonight, is really emboldened them and emboldened their confidence that Donald Trump is going to continue to keep picking up the delegates that he needs to, what they hope become the nominee by mid-March, or the presumptive nominee by mid-March, I should say.
All right, Elena Treen in Las Vegas, thank you very much. We are, as we just noted, waiting for Donald Trump to speak in moments. We'll be back.
Donald Trump to speak any minute now after CNN has predicted that he has won Nevada. Let's go to Harry Enton at the Magic Wall with the latest on the vote count. Harry, what are you seeing?
And what are we seeing? We're seeing Donald Trump dominating in the Silver State, Nevada. Look at this. He's got nearly 97% of the vote. Of course, I'll note that he only has 792 votes. Ryan Binkley, the only other guy who's competing in these caucuses with 26, just 2% of the estimated vote is in so far. We've got votes down from Clark County, which, of course, home to Las Vegas. Look at this. Donald Trump way out ahead there. Also, Washoe County, which, of course, is where Reno is. I prefer Reno to Las Vegas myself. Look at this. Donald Trump way up there, 96% of the vote to Ryan Binkley's 4% of the vote. Now, you might be wondering, where is Nikki Haley on here? Where is Nikki Haley? And the reason you don't see Nikki Haley is because she decided to instead take part in the Nevada primary. Basically, the candidates had to choose. Take part in the primary on Tuesday or take part in the caucuses on Thursday. The caucuses are where the delegates are allocated. But on Tuesday, I think Nikki Haley had the idea, hey, maybe I could notch you in here even if I don't get any delegates. No. She, in fact, lost to none of the candidates, or none of these candidates. Nikki Haley just got 30% of the vote. But again, if you look at where we are right now in these caucuses, we see that Donald Trump is well ahead here. He is leading in both of these counties. And I will also note, Laura, there was another contest that took place today, and that happened right over here. Let's see if we can get over there. There we go. The U.S. Virgin Islands, We have 99% of the estimated vote in there. And what do we see here? This was actually a matchup between Donald Trump and Nikki Haley. We see Donald Trump easily winning here, 74% of the vote to 26%. Look, it's just 4 delegates. But you know what? 4 delegates will certainly help Donald Trump as he's on his road. Right now, as we look overall, we see, look here, Donald Trump with 60 delegates, Nikki Haley with just 17. Donald Trump should expand that lead tonight as we award more and more delegates to Donald Trump based on the votes in the Silver State, where, of course, we see Donald Trump absolutely dominating, even though there's 2% of the vote in right now. We'll keep counting, Laura.
This breakdown is so helpful, and also the reminder of why Nikki Haley is not part of this in Nevada, and that Tuesday that was that primary, and here we are with this caucus, which had all the marbles, as you rightly point out, in the delegate count. Harry Enten, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're going to take a bit of a break right now. We'll take a bit of Trump's victory speech when it comes out, plus the other seismic news in politics. President Biden defending his memory after that special counsel report has come in, not from Jack Smith, but the other special counsel, and Donald Trump's Supreme Court hearing over whether he should, in fact, stay on the ballot.
There is plenty of news tonight to go around. I'm Abby Phillip in New York alongside Laura Coates in Washington. CNN projects tonight that Donald Trump has won the Nevada Republican caucuses, a victory that surprises no one. Nikki Haley chose not to compete for that state's delegates. The former president has now won all 3 Republican contests so far in this race as he continues his march through the primary season.
And at the White House tonight, Abby, an angry President Biden dismissing criticism of memory lapses in the wake of the special counsel report that concluded that he willfully retained and disclosed classified documents, but will not face charges.
That's
Your
what
memory has gotten worse, Mr. President?
My memory is not good. My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I become president. None of you thought I could pass any of the things I got passed. How'd that happen? You know, I guess I just forgot what was going on.
Let's bring in Harry Enten back at the Magic Wall. Harry, now we heard President Biden defending his memory and his age, frankly, earlier today, telling our own CNN MJ Lee, who cited polling about the concerns, that she was wrong. What do they say?
Well, I'll tell you, they do think that President Biden is a little bit too old. So this is a great question. We got a little timeline for you here. I think Biden is too old to be an effective president. You go back to June of 2020, just 36% of registered voters nationally believe that he was too old to be an effective president. Look at where we were in November of 2023. Just a few months ago, this was taken in 6 key swing states, the 6 closest states that Biden won in the 2020 election. Look at this number. It has leaped up to 71%. Nearly double where we were in June of 2020. And you know, Laura, I've been looking at a lot of poll data trying to figure out why Joe Biden is trailing Donald Trump, even as the economy is improving. And I must say, I do believe it is tied to age, because this is the one thing that just gets worse for Biden in the voters' minds. He just keeps getting older. And we can see here on this individual question about age when we're looking specifically at Joe Biden. But I also want to look here, and I want to compare Trump and Biden, all right? Better at being competent and effective. This, I think, tells it all. So if you look back in June of 2020, among registered voters, this was nationally, Biden held a lead on this metric, okay? He was up 47% to 38%. Look at where we were just a month ago. This is an NBC News poll that came out over the weekend. Look here, Donald Trump, better at being competent and effective. 48% of registered voters say that, compared to just 32% of voters who say Joe Biden. So it's not just on the individual age question where voters are increasingly believing that Joe Biden is too old. He is also losing on the matchup against Donald Trump. It has become significantly worse for him. And again, when I look at all of these different poll metrics, this seems to be the one that is most closely tied, Laura, to how voters are feeling coming into this election. And this is the #1 reason I believe that Joe Biden is losing to Donald Trump in the national polls. And unless he's able to do something over the months to come, this will be the reason that Joe Biden is not reelected.
This will be really telling over time. We will look to see what the voters ultimately say. The polling is one thing, the voting is another. Harry Enten, thank you so much.
Thank
Abby?
you.
Thanks, Laura. And my panel in New York is back with me. Before we get started, I just want to make a note of something. In the last hour, we were discussing Elise Stefanik's interview here on CNN. Mark Short, you remember he's former Vice President Mike Pence's aide, he tweeted a photo that he said was of Elise Stefanik. And it turns out, according to her advisors, that was not her in that photo. The photo showed a congresswoman cowered in the Capitol on January 6th. So I wanted to make a note of that. That incorrect information by Mark Short, Mike Pence's former chief of staff. Now, on Joe Biden, which has been a big source of conversation here, what Harry just laid out, Scott, really is, I think, the big picture of all of this. We talk about the age question specifically, but when you look at the trend in just the poll numbers, this is something that we did not see in 2020. Donald Trump leading Joe Biden in the polls, and then specifically faring better than Joe Biden on the question of whether he is fit, age-wise, stamina-wise, to serve in this office.
I don't know that we've had a Republican candidate for president with a consistent polling lead since 2004 until this very moment. I mean, Donald Trump has a consistent lead over Joe Biden, and I agree with Harry. I think it's mostly because of this issue. It got worse today because of this report. It got then further worse because of the press conference. And I don't know how he's going to recover it. I mean, the only way to recover it would be to undertake a series of public-facing events that gave people something else to think about or something else to chew on. But every time he has a public-facing event, it gets worse, just like it did tonight when he had this press conference and he had a mix-up while he was out there and fussed at the press. And so they're in a real bad fix here on this topic. And of course, Trump's not without his warts. His candidacy has limitations as well, not the least of which is he may be convicted of a crime before it's over with. But right now, Trump has a consistent lead. It is mostly due to concerns about Biden's fitness, and it is not going away, and it will not go away before November.
Is this one of those things where it's like you see this in totally different ways depending on what, whether you're an R or a D, whether Joe Biden actually came across tonight as you described it, someone who has emotion in all the right places when it comes to his son, who's angry about being sort of maligned in this document, who has feistiness. You see it that way, but I mean, to be honest, a lot of people didn't see it that way. I mean, is that how it's playing out, you think, in the American public?
Yeah, I think people who watch this, right, because a lot of people won't watch this, but people who watch this saw a president give a statement where he was batting down some of the issues that were in that report. He was speaking very forcefully. So the one mistake he made, which was about confusing the name of a leader in the country, we've seen other people do that recently, including Mike Johnson, the speaker, who did it on Sunday on Meet the Press, where he confused Israel and Iran. About Harry's point about the polls, Joe Biden should have never been president, according to history, right? I mean, we haven't seen a Democratic vice president get elected to the presidency since 1836, right, on his own, since Martin Van Buren. So this should never have occurred in the first place. He ran, he was nominated. No Democrat who had run before had even won the nomination since Adlai Stevenson in 1956, right? So Democratic voters actually broke history when they made Joe Biden president. So the polls in the history may say one thing, but I think this president has beaten history already, and we may see him do it again in November.
Yeah, look, I think all of that is correct. The missing caveat is that, yes, it was a historic presidency because we are actually coming out of a once-in-a-generational pandemic. In fact, we are going through that once-in-a-generational pandemic when the election was held. So certainly, I think that had an impact in many ways. If you go back to Nancy Pelosi ripping up the speech of Donald Trump coming off of that State of the Union, and at that point, it was quite clear that a Trump presidency, a second term with the 7 million jobs pre-COVID that had been created was all but assured. So the world has changed in many, many ways since then. And one of them is the fact that, as you see in these numbers, people do not believe that he has the intellectual dexterity at this particular moment to deal with the issues that are confronting this nation. And it's not just about the press conference, because I would agree. I think there are Democrats who would say that they'd like to see that fight, that fire in the belly that's still there. But It's about what happens when the cameras go away. And if you remember going all the way back to Afghanistan, when the president looked the entire nation in the eye, and he said it was the unanimous recommendation of my senior military advisors to remove every single last troop. And then we watched actually the chairman of the Joint Chiefs go before Congress and say it was his recommendation to leave at least 2,500 troops behind. And to this day, nobody has asked who was lying or what was preventing that message from getting through to our commander-in-chief. So again, yes, you can say there's the fire in the belly. Yes, no one should take any pleasure with a statement coming officially on paper from the DOJ that the president is compromised from a capacity standpoint. But it opens the door to questions that many people have been talking about and whispering about for a very long time.
Can I say something? Listen, I think what you're seeing in those poll numbers is America having a memory lapse. And I think we don't remember just how bad Donald Trump was because he hasn't been under the scrutiny that the sitting president has been under for the last 4 years. And also, I will tell you that for the last 3 years, with a very difficult makeup in the Congress, Joe Biden has gotten more done than any other president in my lifetime. I think he is the most consequential, effective president of my lifetime who gets the least amount of credit. So the memory I want to have is about the CHIPS Act, is about the Infrastructure Act, it's about the $35 cap on insulin, it's about all the things he's done that we don't give him credit for. And again, this is a binary choice. I think Biden's campaign slogan should be 81 years old versus 91 counts. Republicans don't care that we are nominating a criminal. Republicans don't care that we are nominating somebody who we heard boast about sexual assault. Republicans don't care that we are nominating somebody that was just held liable of sexual abuse and liable of $83 million. If Joe Biden was under one count, not 91, Democrats wouldn't be nominating him.
Well, this
All right,
we're going to disagree, but
we
I
got to
think
leave it right
specifically
there.
to that-
Everyone, stick around for us. We got to go to Laura's Court of Public Opinion next. Laura?
We are back with our Court of Public Opinion, our virtual courtroom where jurors hear legal arguments and then they're going to weigh in on the big questions of the day. Now we're turning to Colorado's efforts to remove former President Donald Trump from the state's primary ballot. Now, the court's ruling, as you can imagine, could have major consequences in other states. The Chief Justice, John Roberts, made this, well, dire prediction.
It'll come down to just a handful of states that are going to decide the presidential election. That's a pretty daunting consequence.
Meanwhile, Justice Elena Kagan had, well, the big question in all of this.
The question that you have to confront is why a single state should decide who gets to be president of the United States.
Tonight, we're going to tap into what the American public thinks of this case. We're bringing in two top attorneys to make their arguments. You've got Norm Eisen. Now, he founded CREW. That's the organization that actually brought the 14th Amendment case, but he's not involved with that organization now. He was also, as you remember, the House Judiciary Special Counsel in Trump's first impeachment trial. And tonight, Norm is representing the former president in this presentation alone. And for the plaintiffs and the action who are trying to remove him from the Colorado ballot, we have Harry Litman, a former U.S. attorney and former deputy assistant attorney general. They'll make their arguments. And then our jurors are going to tell us what they think of what they've heard tonight. And this is a diverse group of everyday Americans meeting tonight for the first time to share their opinions with each other and, of course, with you. So let's start with Norm to put forward the argument on behalf of the former president, Donald Trump. Norm, why should Trump stay on the ballot?
Judge Laura, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the United States is the world's foremost democracy. The thing that makes us a democracy is that the people, you decide who should be president. You get to choose. By interposing the 14th Amendment for the first time to block a presidential candidate, Donald Trump, who has not been charged with insurrection or convicted of insurrection, it is interfering with your right to choose whether you want him or not. If we allow this to happen, if we allow Colorado to make this decision and throw him off the ballot, We heard today that that will unleash chaos across the United States as all 50 states do what they want. Don't take my word for it as counsel for Donald Trump. Here is what Ketanji Brown Jackson had to say, who was appointed to the Supreme Court by President Biden, Donald Trump's adversary.
I guess my question is why the framers would have designed a system that could result in interim disuniformity in this way, where we have elections pending and different states suddenly saying you're eligible, you're not, on the basis of this kind of thing.
It's not only the common sense, it's not only the meaning of democracy, the chaos, it's the words of the 14th Amendment, because Section 5 of the 14th Amendment says Congress shall pass implementing legislation if they choose to. That's how we get a uniform national system. That hasn't happened here. Donald Trump should not be disqualified. Our democracy is in your hands. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Thank you, Judge Laura.
Well, Harry Littman takes the opposite position. Harry, share with us and make your case of why you think the former president should be removed from the primary ballot.
Judge Laura, ladies and gentlemen, you have in front of you a weighty and important issue, but fortunately, it's a simple one. Our Constitution, our highest law, imposes qualifications for people who want to lead us as president. They have to be 35, they have to be born in this country, and they must not have taken an oath to uphold the Constitution and then engaged in an insurrection. When that happens, they are disqualified. The country doesn't have to take the risk. They'll abuse their power again. There are no do-overs. Donald Trump engaged in an insurrection and forfeited his right to hold future office. You saw it in front of your eyes January 6th. You saw it again in this courtroom. After he lost the election and the Electoral College confirmed, all that was left to do was to read the votes. But at that point, Trump had one last desperate chance. He worked up his supporters into a frenzy and sent them down to the Capitol to fight like hell, or they wouldn't have a country anymore. That was an insurrection. And and how do you know that? If Trump had been taken by surprise when that riot broke out, he would have done everything he could to stop it. What did he do instead? He said, it's okay to hang Mike Pence. He rejoiced in the melee that happened that day. He was the opposite. Look, my friend here ends with saying that democracy is on the line. That's true. The democratic process needs to run its course. Well, it has run its course. Probably the most sacred principle of our democracy, the peaceful transfer of power, requires, the vindication of that principle requires me exactly that Trump be disqualified from having a do-over and another shot. Thank you.
Well, we've heard from both sides of this prospective issue, the big question of the day that the Supreme Court was trying to synthesize and summarize for us today. Let's turn now to the jury. I'm very curious of what you all think about this. The big question, do you think, picking up with where one party left off, do you think that Donald Trump should be disqualified from the ballot, although he has not been convicted or charged with insurrection? What do you say?
I think it's a slippery slope. I think that on the one hand, you know, he was president prior and there were things that happened, and that day he did incite a riot. I feel that he did that. He told the people, go on down there and get Mike Pence to do his job, and that's what he said to them that day. And then he even told them that he was coming with them, that he was going to come with them. Don't worry, I'm going to be there with you. He kept saying that to them, I'm going to be there with you. So you're telling the crowd, you know, I'm coming with you, I'm going to be there with you. That's getting them even more hyped up. And so they went down there, and he even tried to get his Secret Service driver to take him to the Capitol. So we did find that out down the line during some of the trials that they've had, where they've had Secret Service kind of take the stand and talk about what happened that day, where he tried to grab the wheel of the car and tried to get them to take him to the Capitol, and they refused it.
You're referring to testimony by Cassidy Hutchinson for the January 6th hearing about what was happening in that moment. So based on that, do you think then that means he should be disqualified, or that slippery slope for him not to?
Absolutely. I think that he probably shouldn't even have been allowed to run again in the first place. But unfortunately, here we are, and he's able to do that. I also see it from the other side, where I'm worried about what will happen if he is not on the ballot. If, you know, what will the people who incited that riot, what will they then do?
Chair 4, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, I agree. It is a slippery slope. It's a slippery slope indeed. But the question really becomes is it does get in some ways to the heart of our democracy. If we remove Trump from the ballot, what is to say that we can remove another candidate from the ballot, right? These sort of laws become then arbitrary. And we sort of set a new precedent of who we can and can't put on the ballot. And when you look at the heart of the 14th Amendment, removing any biases or prejudices that we may have towards President Trump, former President Trump, certainly it does kind of get to the heart of the fact that no state can impose certain laws that don't ensure liberty. So it kind of gets to that issue, hence why it's a slippery slope. And I think that there's a reason why perhaps even though a certain demographic of Americans may like for him to be removed, constitutionally is their grounds.
Juror number 2, you're been champing at the bit to respond. What's your response?
Yeah, I think certainly every 4 years, and perhaps every election year, some people are disappointed that the person they like to vote for is not on the ballot. There were millions of us in 1976 who wanted to vote for Ronald Reagan for president, but we couldn't because of the process. He was not nominated by the Republican Party, and Gerald Ford was. And we waited 4 years and then had our chance. And granted, the two processes, the two reasons here are different, but the end result is the same. We didn't get to vote for the person we wanted to vote for. And the other question for me, and I understand the difficulty, there's a lot of lawyerly parsing of words and so on, but does the 14th Amendment mean anything? And is it, you know, it's part of the Constitution. If it doesn't work anymore, then we should take it out.
Juror number 3, how do you say, in terms of thinking about this, he hasn't been charged with insurrection, to the point of your other jurors here, but the slippery slope that you're both identifying and you're alluding to as well could go either way. How do you see this?
Well, I don't think that we should not take him off of the ballot because of what could break loose. I think that globally, we're just in really challenging times. And I think that the systems that the country were built on are flawed. And I think this is another example of that. Like, if Colorado didn't bring this to the forefront, then who would have? Because there is something to be said about this section in the Constitution. I agree with juror number 1 that he aligned with them. He never told them to stop doing what they were doing on January 6th. I think he created an environment to welcome people to Washington, D.C. to behave in this manner and not thinking that actions would be taken against them. So to me, it seems like he incited an insurrection. And I'm curious to know how or who would be responsible to bring up the Constitution if it wasn't the state, because it didn't happen with the Supreme Court. It didn't happen in Congress. And I think it's a conversation that needs to be had, and I think it's very serious.
Let me go down the line with each of you and ask this as a yes or no question. Do you think that Trump should be on the ballot? Yes or no? No.
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 Yeah. No.
Oh, well, that seems hesitant when you talked about maybe you wanted a maybe option as well. Let me ask another question and have you explain a little bit why you're reluctant to give a yes or no on this. But let me ask you, you've alluded to this, who should be the decider of this? You've heard from the different arguments here. Who should decide this? Is it Congress? Is it the courts? Is it the voters? Juror number 4?
Yeah, do I believe that he should be on the ballot? No, I don't believe. I don't agree with anything that President Trump stands for, right? And I agree with what jury 3 and 1 said. Absolutely. He did incite a riot. So do I believe that he should be on the ballot? No. But looking at the facts constitutionally, it does call into some questions about what's the rubric in terms of who we decide per states and what states decide of who gets on the ballot. So we go down this very slippery slope for our federal republic, and I think that's what I'm calling into question. No different than the sort of rhetoric President Trump is using to go down a slippery slope of eroding our federal republic.
So should he be, this is deciding from the states, or should be the voters be deciding this issue, or Congress? What do you say? States, voters, or Congress?
At the current time, I think that I would want to say that the voters are reliable, but I think that we kind of sort of not. I would like for, Congress to kind of get themselves together and do the job that I think that they should be doing, and that probably is this. Or really, the judicial system really should decide it. I don't think we should leave this up to states. I think that kind of takes into account, you're telling the state, okay, Colorado, hey, you can take him off the ballot. We're giving you this opportunity. It scares me, even though I don't want him on the ballot, it kind of scares me as to what can happen down the line with future states, with future decisions with this, with other states, and who can decide whether, okay, I don't really want so-and-so on the ballot. Let's find a reason to not put somebody on there. And that can happen. So I don't think we want that.
What do you say?
Well, my concern with all of this is the Constitution, the preservation of the Constitution. And we have a procedure. We're in that process now. So I think the Supreme Court can decide. Now, they may throw it back to Congress. Well, but that's part of the process. That's the procedure.
Juror number 3?
I reluctantly think Congress should decide.
Reluctantly so. How about 4?
I think the people should decide.
Well, we have a lot of varying opinions here tonight, and certainly the Supreme Court has their work cut out for them. Norm Eisen and Harry Litman, thank you for making tonight's arguments. It presents a lot of questions for this juror. And a special thanks to these jurors in the Court of Public Opinion. If you would like to be a juror on the next Court of Public Opinion, get in touch with us with the address you see on your screen. It's Laura Coates Jury at CNN.com.
In just moments, Donald Trump is expected to speak. We are going to take a quick break, and we will... Looks like Donald Trump is coming straight to the microphone. Let's listen.
We said anything over 80 we'll be happy with. 98%. Incredible right from the beginning. Your governor, Joe Lombardo. Governor who's here to Stavros. Thank you very much.
All right, there's a little bit of an audio issue in the room where Donald Trump is. We're going to take a quick break and wait for that to get resolved. We'll be back after this. We're back now. Donald Trump is on the stage in Las Vegas speaking. Let's listen.
Ukraine with Russia, this would have never happened. The Israeli attack would have never happened. Inflation would have never happened. The world would be a much place right now. And we're going to make sure, and we're going to bring it back fast, and we're going to bring it back very, very strong. Very, very strong. And it's so sad to see. It's all of the death that you've witnessed with Ukraine and Russia fighting, and again what happened in Israel. All of the death and all of the destruction of cities and places that are ancient places in a sense. Ancient buildings being knocked down. You can never replace it. But all those people that died, most importantly, would have never happened, and we're going to change it. We're going to change it around. We're going to get it back to normalcy. It can't continue like this. The world is exploding. Stock all over the world. We were respected. We were respected like never before. Just 3 years ago, we are now a laughing stock all over the world. We're not respected even a little bit. And you understand why. You understand why. You need leadership, and this country does not have leadership. It has no idea what's happening. It's lost its way. It's a failing nation, and we're not going to have a failing nation much longer. I just want to really thank the great people of Nevada, because this was a turnout. I don't know if you know, you broke the all-time record. The all-time caucus record was broken, and we kept waiting and waiting because they're all flowing in from all parts of your state. They all want to be. I said, well, wait. But I said, they're going to be very upset when they come here and everyone's gone. But I said, we have to start. But this has been a tremendous state. And, you know, if we win this state, we easily win the election in November. We have to win the election. And you know, great countries. Thank you very much. But great countries are all about a lot of things, but two things in particular. You have to have strong borders, and you have to have free, fair, and honest elections. And we don't have either. And we're going to have them back. We had 3 years ago, we had the strongest border in the history of our country, and we were doing great. And our economy was the best, and we rebuilt our military, so many things. And then you had the tragedy of the Afghanistan surrender. That was nothing less than a surrender. And President Putin watched that, and he saw that, and he said, wow, this could be my chance to go and do what I wanted to do. They never would have happened. It would have never happened, but he went in and he did what he wanted to do. But we're going to bring the world back. We're going to bring the world back to normalcy, and this country is going to be the leader, and we're going to be also at the same time focused on a thing called America First, right? And it will be peace through strength. You know, a few terms that are very descriptive, but peace through strength. There's no reason for this. I left and I see that all over the Middle East they're bombing again. I said, I remember that before I came, everyone was bombing. You don't have to bomb. We defeated ISIS, radically defeated ISIS. And then we had no wars, you know, they say, first in 72 years, first president. I remember on the debate stage with Hillary Clinton. I don't use the word crooked anymore. I use that word for somebody else. I retired it. That was a good night for Hillary. She was very happy that night. That was one of the best nights. I retired the name from Hillary and put it onto Joe, Crooked Joe. But we have a country that has tremendous potential, but if anything bad happens in this next election, if this election isn't won by us, we're not going to have a country anymore. We're not going to have a country. So I appreciate the tremendous record that you set tonight. You set an all-time record. And it really was a tremendous turnout. They had lines going back, and they sort of knew who was doing it. When you get 98%, we wanted to get over 80, and we got 98. And also, if you remember, and last night, you know what happened last night, right? None of the above. So I'd like to congratulate none of the above. I was one of those none of ever aboves. I was one of them. No, I watched that last night, and they won by 44 points. None of the above. So I want to congratulate. But seriously, we have to get back. This was a great day. This was a great night. Our Supreme Court hopefully will be doing something in terms of helping our country and preserving democracy. We have to preserve our democracy. And I think they had a very, very interesting day and a very beautiful day. Perhaps I think it was really a very beautiful sight to watch, and it's the way it's supposed to be. And hopefully the decision will be a very important decision, but there's never been anything like it. In the polls, we're leading everybody. We are right now. Is there any way we can call the election for next Tuesday? That's all I want. I want to call the election for next Tuesday, but we're going to make our country great again. We're going to make it great. We're going to make it greater than ever before. The enthusiasm and the turnout, Doug and I were talking, I don't think you've ever seen anything like it, right? You were at various of the caucus sites, and they both came back and they said, we've never seen anything like it. Would you like to say a few words? Please.
Thank you, President Trump. I just want to build on that. At the caucus sites that Catherine and I were at tonight, the lines were stringing around the block in those buildings,
We've
people
been
waiting
listening to Donald Trump while he's been in Las Vegas, going through a number of different factors today, including his concerns that we're not respected across the world, and talking about an all-time record being broken, he says, in terms of the caucus. He also is asking for the election to be called for next Tuesday, believing that he would be successful there. We've got a lot to chew over with our panel, in particular here right now. I've got Daniel Dale with us here to fact check. Very important function on a day like this. We also have Elliott Williams and also Jim Schultz. There was this moment, Daniel, I'll turn to you on this question about turnout. Consistently a focus of Donald Trump, but he did actually have quite a successful victory for a caucus that only really he was a contender in.
He did. I think he's still entitled to claim, I mean, we don't have full results, but, you know, he is the only contender in part because he's the dominant figure in the Republican Party. So from a fact-check perspective, if he wants to claim a record, I have no objection. I should point out, though, I mean, he did kind of a softer version of his usual election denial. He said, we need free and fair elections in this country. We don't have them. We have them. We have them. We had them in 2020. We had them before. And so, you know, in these magnanimous victory speeches, he tends not to say elections are rigged, you know, rigged and stolen and so on. But I think even the softer version needs to be called out when he says it.
I was really surprised. We were all sort of talking about how would he begin his speech, and we thought maybe on President Joe Biden and special counsel, maybe the Supreme Court. He did not really address Biden at all so far. We've heard that. But he did talk about the Supreme Court. And Jim Elliott, he said, hopefully SCOTUS will, he didn't say SCOTUS, that's my acronym. Hopefully the Supreme Court, he said, will have will rule the way it's supposed to be. He called it an interesting and beautiful day. He didn't really go into the details of the 14th Amendment argument disqualifying him from the ballot out of Colorado. Did that surprise you?
Yeah, well, I thought he was going to lead with Biden, right? I thought that's what he would lead with. But, you know, I think he led with the victory lap, which was a smart decision on his part. Do the victory lap, hit the Supreme Court briefly, and get off stage. Not a bad strategy. He's going to turn around and go negative tomorrow on Biden, I'm sure.
Oh, well, tomorrow's already here in some parts of the country.
That's
not
right.
invaded quite yet. But, Elliot, when you looked at that particular aspect of it, you know, some would look, and because he talked about Joe Biden, but only with respect to Hillary Clinton, saying he had changed the name from Crooked Hillary to now Crooked Joe. That's where it really ended so far.
And, which was odd to me because that's potentially his opening. So to be clear, he's probably not done speaking. He seemed to hand the microphone off to somebody else. I mean, he made a reference in the context of the Supreme Court to talking about preserving or protecting democracy. It's a generic point. Frankly, it's not an unreasonable point if you believe, as the president seems to, or at least his attorneys seem to believe, that their position in the Supreme Court today was for the good of American democracy and in line with the Constitution. That's one of the rare points in which his hyperbole wasn't so out of line.
You know, interestingly enough, Daniel, there was a time when, just a few weeks ago, when you had the New Hampshire primary, for example, the former president did not necessarily focus on the victory lap we're talking about now. He was focusing on really the audacity he perceived of Nikki Haley staying in the race. And there was a focus on what she was doing or was not doing. And that seemed to really get under his skin. This time, he's talking directly about the victory that he believes he has, the securing it. And again, he talks about the all-time caucus record that he says that they have. And he also went on to say this: if this election isn't won by us, we're not going to have a country anymore.
Yeah, that's a staple of his rally rhetoric. I think it's obvious hyperbole. We currently have a country. He is currently not the president, despite what he may try to suggest at some point. So yeah, this is how he operates. You know, he operates based on his mood on a given day. Sometimes he can be convinced to read the magnanimous script after a victory. Sometimes he wants to begin exacting revenge against someone he perceives has slighted him, like Nikki Haley on that night. And so it's very much day by day with Donald Trump.
Well, we will see, maybe minute by minute. He's not done speaking. We'll talk more about this, and our special coverage does continue, so stick with us.
And welcome back to CNN's special live coverage of a seismic day. Just moments ago, we heard Donald Trump speaking after CNN projected that he won the Nevada caucuses. Let's discuss with my panel. The big headline, actually, out of the Trump speech is that he ended it, and he was happy about the Supreme Court seeming to sway in his favor in his case, but he said nothing about Joe Biden.
Yeah, nothing about Biden. He took a sort of an indirect punch at Nikki Haley over the none of the above thing, and kept it short and got off the stage. It was rather surprising, frankly, and subdued. But you know, this is one of those days where he doesn't need to make any news. There's plenty of news today, and most of it's bad for Biden. And so why interject yourself into the middle of it? So that was a smart move tonight to get in and get out.
Rare times Donald Trump seems to be listening to somebody.
It's interesting to me that we are talking about what we heard Donald Trump say, because we didn't hear him, right? After 4 years of being president and all these years of campaigning, he had terrible sound today. It was very difficult to make out what he was saying. I think it was smart of him not to actually direct comments. I don't think he mentioned Nikki Haley's name, did he?
No, he congratulated none of the above.
But you know what he did? He said, which happened last night.
Right.
The caucuses were not the primary was Sunday. If Joe Biden had confused Sunday for Wednesday, it would be a 5-alarm fire. But it's Donald Trump who, like I said to you earlier, says stupid stuff on a daily basis.
I mean, the reality of this very odd campaign that we are in is that we could be in effectively a general election pretty soon. And the question will be, how much of Donald Trump will we see? And that might be a determining factor in how well or how poorly he does against Joe Biden in the coming months.
Well, the question is, how much will the Biden campaign make us see, right? Because part of the strategy of the Biden campaign is the more people see Donald Trump, the more they're reminded of how bad it was when he was telling us to inject ourselves with bleach, to get rid of COVID. The more people get reminded of what things were like when he was president, the more they'll say, you know what, I really don't want to go back to that chaos. So you've got President Biden, who's got rents going down, gas prices going down, unemployment going down, wages going up, the GDP is going up. He's got all the right indicators, and he's got Donald Trump, who's doing all the wrong things. I think he's got a case to make.
Well, look, I think certainly that's what the Biden administration is trying to sell. But I think if you look at the polling numbers, the American people aren't buying it. And I think if you focus on the little things that President Trump did focus on tonight, he was talking about the apprehensions of Americans writ large when you're looking at the actual chaos around the world. He's talking about what's happening in Gaza. He's talking about what's happening in Ukraine. He's talking about what's happening in the South China Sea. And the fact that whether you want to acknowledge it or not, it has been Joe Biden's weakness on the global stage after he quoted Abraham Lincoln, said his whole soul was in uniting this country and that America was back. And now we find ourselves closer to a world war than we have ever been. So, yes, we can talk about the wages going up, but the wages are not keeping up with inflation. We can talk about the fact that unemployment is coming down, but we have 7 million able-bodied Americans who are still absent from the workforce. So, yes, there are a lot of ways to skew the statistics, but ultimately, how do the American people feel? They feel as if they're not doing as well today as they were when Joseph Robinette Biden took the oath of office.
There's still a lot of time left. Not in this program, but in this election,
Joe Biden
for
quoted
consumer
Abraham Lincoln.
sentiment.
Donald Trump wanted to offer him advice on how to negotiate on slavery.
There's still time for the sentiment of voters to change. Everyone, you guys stand by for us, and actually, you guys are going home tonight. Thank you for being with us tonight. Coming up next for us, Tucker Carlson is speaking with Russia's President Vladimir Putin in a controversial interview. We will discuss all the things that were said with an expert on Russia. That's ahead.
You know, Donald Trump may have won his third contest now, but he has a very complicated primary and legal calendar ahead of him. CNN's Harry Enton is back at the wall. Harry, what can you tell us about these two things?
Yeah, the two things that are colliding. I feel like 2024 is going to have more news in it than I care to handle. Thursday had too much, but the rest of the year, who knows? All right, look, Trump's potential legal calendar. Where are we right now? We're, at least in the East, on Friday, February 9th. You have a little bit coming ahead, right? Deadline to ask SCOTUS to intervene in the immunity cases on Monday. But in reality, the next big date in terms of Trump's potential legal calendar isn't, at least in this point, until March 25th. Now, why is that important? Well, the 5th is Super Tuesday, right? That's when there are a ton of delegates that are at stake on the Republican side. And then the 12th, as I circle right here, that's the first day that anyone could potentially accumulate a majority of delegates to win the nomination. So that happens before the Stormy Daniels hush money trial starts. It's before the classified documents start in May of 2024, and it's certainly well before Fulton County prosecutors' proposed trial starts. So the fact is, the primary may not, in fact, be all that impacted by it. And I will note, though, if Trump wins the nomination, is convicted by the GOP, what should the GOP do? The majority, the clear majority of likely South Carolina GOP primary voters say, keep Trump. 60% of them say keep Trump. Replace Trump is just at 36%. So I'm not sure that a conviction would have any real effect even if it were to happen before, in fact, the Republican nomination process wrapped up, or even afterward. But here is the one thing, Laura, that I would keep my mind out on. One thing for primary voters, it's another thing in the general election. Biden versus Trump margin. Currently, Trump plus 2 points. But if Trump is convicted, look at this. We see Biden up by 4 points. So just because something holds with the primary electorate, Laura, doesn't mean it will hold in the general electorate. This, to me, is the #1 X factor that I'm looking at as we head towards the general election, whether Trump gets convicted or not. We'll just have to wait and see.
It ain't over till the general election sings. Harry Enton, thank you. We'll be back in just a moment.
Thank you for watching our special coverage tonight.
Hey, Abby and I are going to be back tomorrow night at 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. Eastern, back to back tomorrow. Well, later on today, the news continues next.